You are listening to Book Clips, a mini podcast in which authors or narrators do readings from novels. Check out the show notes for the synopsis and buy links for this book.
Chapter 5. Sunlight woke Tasia from a heavy slumber some hours later. She blinked sticky eyelids open to find Mila still breathing deeply beside her. The girl looked innocent and childlike while asleep, more like Tasia's younger sister than a lover. Before her eyes had opened, she'd dreamed of Nick, of the time they'd played in the farthest palace meadow, exhausting themselves with running and laughing and daring each other to jump from trees, before finally falling asleep in a patch of purple flowers. Nick. Her brother. Her best friend. She felt shame for thinking it, but she missed her brother even more than she missed her mother. Tasia sat up, pulled her robe around her to block the chill. The candles in the windowsill from the night before had disappeared, and the round table where she and Mila usually had their meals was set with fresh pink and white flowers, a carafe with teacups beside it, and 2 dishes with silver covers over them. The chambermaids had come and gone then. Tasia wondered if the food on the table was the morning meal, or, judging from the strength of the sun, the noontide meal. It wasn't unusual for her and Mila to sleep through the arrival of the morning meal and wake just before noontide, but given that they hadn't gone to bed the night before until nearly dawn, Tasia wouldn't be surprised if they'd slept through both meals. She stretched, winced when her bare feet touched the cold stone of the floor. She crossed from the bed to the table, lifted the metal cover above her plate. The steamy smell of roasted hen, garlic, and wilted greens struck her nose and made her mouth water. Definitely the noontide meal. Tasia replaced the cover and plucked a grape from the bowl between the dishes, popping it into her mouth while she wandered to the window overlooking the courtyard. It was the same courtyard where her mother had kept the exotic birds she'd brought to the palace when she married the emperor, and Tasia saw one of them now, its snow-white form flitting from the tree to the cobblestones below. It hopped around, cocking its head. Tasia wondered if it was one of Mother's original birds or its offspring. Did it know that a beautiful woman with golden hair used to glide through the courtyard each morning, spreading seeds for her precious pets? Probably not. Like so many in the Empire, the birds had probably forgotten the Empress Christiane years ago. A knock at the bedchamber door startled her out of her musings. "Princess Natasia," came a muffled male voice. Whoever it was knocked again, and Mila stirred with a grumpy groan, rolling over without opening her eyes. Tasia tightened the robe at her waist, straightened her hair, and walked to the door with an assured step. "Who is it?" she asked. "Commander Cole of East Hook, and someone I wish to introduce." Tasia opened the door. Cole stood in the doorway, one hand on the hilt of his short sword, scarred face inscrutable as ever. Next to him stood a tallish, serious-looking woman. She was dressed in one of the black and silver uniforms of the palace guard, but Tasia knew there were no women in the guard. She'd heard there were a handful of women in the city guard, along with a few score in the imperial army. But there were no women in the palace guard. There never had been. But there she stood in a palace guard uniform anyway, as if no one had informed her of her mistake, the black padded leather shining and smelling of oil. The silver-pommeled short sword and silver-pommeled dagger hanging from her hips appeared equally clean and new. Like Cole, she rested her hand on the pommel of the sword, but unlike the head guardsman, it was a stance that made her look slightly awkward and uncomfortable. The woman stood just behind Cole. She took in Tasia with inquisitive eyes, the same color as her uniform. Eyes that contrasted with her rich, bronze-colored skin. Tasia could tell in a single glance that she was an Easterner, but not from the northeastern mountain provinces like her mother, or even the Far East where the war was being fought. The tanned skin, the gentle folds around the woman's eyes, the high cheekbones, they all marked her as a nomad of the desert tribes. Tasia tried to decide which was more surprising, a woman wearing a palace guard uniform or a nomad wearing one. She found herself staring at the woman before her without decorum.
"Good midday to your majesty,"
Cole said with a perfunctory bow. Tasia tore her attention from the guard to Cole. "Good midday, Commander Cole of Easthook." Cole indicated the woman.
"This is Guard Jocelyn of Toronto,"
he said.
"After discussion with your father earlier today, it is decided that she is to be your personal guard from now on."
Of Toronto? If Tasia had needed any confirmation that the woman was a desert nomad, there it was. The barely conquerable, barely rulable territory stood just east of the capital lands, consisting mainly of a vast and empty desert and a sparse scattering of nomadic herders, who smelled much like the animals they tended to. There were a few cities in Toronto, nestled against the coastline, but these were mostly small, dirty places, the kinds of cities that pirates and crooked merchants called home. And Cole hadn't introduced the new guard as being from one of these places. She wasn't Jocelyn of Parathene or Jocelyn of Negusto. She was Jocelyn of Toronto. To name someone as being of an entire empty territory, only the homeless tribal people of the desert wastelands were named in such a way. Tasia's heart sunk. So, her father and Cole had found a way around the problem of having a male guard in her private chambers after all. They'd sifted through the bottom dregs of the army's ranks and created themselves a female guard. Tasia did her best to hide her disappointment. "It is a pleasure to make your acquaintance, Guard Jocelyn," she said to the nomad. She held out her hand, palm down, as a royal or noble-born woman did when meeting a servant for the first time. Jocelyn hesitated. She glanced at Cole for the briefest of moments, but then quickly dropped to one knee, took Tasia's hand, and kissed it stiffly. "It is my honor to serve both you and the Empire, Princess," she said, the words as stiff as the kiss had been. She rose again. Behind her, Tasia heard bedsheets rustle, and Jocelyn's eyes flitted towards what Tasia assumed was a sleepy, half-awake Mila. It was not good that they had seen the handmaid in Tasia's bed, but it was unlikely that either of them would draw the correct conclusion about the girl's reason for being there. Handmaids were often close to the royalty they served, and it wasn't that unusual for two close girlfriends to share a bed. The chambermaids might chatter amongst themselves about the frequency with which they found Mila in Tasia's bed, but even they probably simply thought that Mila and Tasia were especially close. Which was true. Nevertheless, Commander Cole was no chambermaid, and he reported directly to the Emperor. For once, Tasia wished Mila had slept in her own bed.
"Jocelyn is a distinguished infantry veteran who has served the Empire well as we fight to protect our borders in the east,"
Cole said. Tasia gave a curt nod. The Empire's fight to protect and expand its borders was never ending, of course, with war following war for as long as Tasia could remember. Toronto itself was a border territory, won through one such a war, its land declared part of the Four Realms when Tasia was a toddler. But although Toronto might be considered a part of the Four Realms by men like Cole and the Emperor Andrith, the desert people were ferociously independent, and some of the more stubborn nomadic tribes still gave the Imperial Army trouble from time to time. Tasia studied the woman soldier. Had she ever had to fight against her own people? A nomad slaughtering other nomads? But the guard's face remained impassive. So she was a well-heeled nomad at least. Domesticated, one might say. "The Empire appreciates your service," Tasia told the guard.
"She saved General Galter of House Keltier's life as he lay wounded in a battle with the barbarians only a month ago,"
Cole said. Jocelyn remained still and silent. "How impressive," Tasia said, though there was no mistaking the mocking edge in her voice. The muscles of Cole's jaw clenched almost imperceptibly.
"Guard Jocelyn is to remain at your side at all times, day and night, by orders of the Emperor,"
Cole continued.
"She will leave your service only upon his order or mine, or upon death."
I see. Tasia locked eyes with the guard. Instead of respectfully looking away as a commoner should, the woman held Tasia's stare without so much as flinching, almost as if she was returning Tasia's challenge with one of her own. Then it seemed she suddenly recalled who it was she stood before, shifting her eyes hastily away. Good. The guard knew her place, or could be taught it. There was that, at least.
The farthest she is permitted to be from you is in your antechamber,
Cole said, gesturing behind them.
Which is also where she will be staying. I already had the chambermaid arrange a bed.
Very well, Tasia said to Cole, resigning herself to her fate.
Once you determine there is no immediate triumph to be had, you accept your circumstances and begin your probe for other routes to victory,
said wise man Norix in her head. Tasia's lifelong tutor probably hadn't intended for his lesson to be used this way, or for his royal pupil to manipulate the very person who had been sent to protect her. As the Emperor's senior advisor, Tasia wouldn't be surprised if old Norix himself was partially to blame for this new bodyguard scheme of her father's. Cole gave a swift bow.
Good day, Princess,
he said, and left without further commentary, closing the bedchamber door behind him, leaving Jocelyn of Tarinto behind to stand awkwardly just inside the doorway. Although sometimes brusque, the curt, unadorned politeness was the one thing Tasia liked about Cole. He understood his role and seemed to have little or no interest in expanding it. He didn't strive to curry Tasia's favor for his own gain, nor had she ever seen him strive to curry anyone else's favor, for that matter, not even the Emperor's. Tasia didn't like him, but she respected him. With any luck, this new hand-picked guard would be like him. If not, Tasia would employ the wise man Norix's advice and search for other routes to victory. Tasia looked the woman up and down. So, she said, a female member of the palace guard. You might be the first in the Empire's history. Jocelyn inclined her head. It's possible, my lady. I am the princess, not a lady, Tasia corrected. She turned, indicated Mila, who was sitting up in the bed, holding her nightrobe closed. Mila, of House Harthing, my handmaid until she comes of age and marries, she is a lady. When you meet a princess, you call her princess or highness or majesty, not lady. Jocelyn said nothing. Tasia locked eyes with the guard, but for a second time, the woman didn't flinch. She stayed as frozen as a courtyard statue. Tasia found the stillness unnerving. Come, Tasia said. Giving commands always helped her disguise unease. You may as well make formal introductions with Lady Mila, as she is with me often as not. Jocelyn followed Tasia across the room to the unkempt bed. Too late, Tasia realized the harness end of the dildo was half visible, sticking out from beneath the sheets. She met Mila's eyes, glanced quickly at the dildo. Mila followed her gaze, subtly pushed the leather contraption completely out of sight. If Jocelyn saw the exchange, she gave no indication. The guard gave Mila a rough, unpracticed bow, and the girl extended her hand in the same manner that Tasia had earlier. Jocelyn kneeled and gave it a swift kiss. Lady Mila, said the guard, I am pleased to make your acquaintance. And I am pleased to make yours, Mila said. She cocked her head to the side. You're well-spoken for a nomad. Tasia thought she saw some kind of emotion flash through Jocelyn's dark eyes, but it passed so quickly that she would be hard-pressed to say if it had actually happened, or if it had only been her imagination. Thank you, my lady, Jocelyn said. I hope you understand that I expect you to defend the Lady Mila's life with the same fervor that you would defend my own, should it ever come to that, Tasia told Jocelyn. The guard gave a single nod. Mila giggled. So dramatic, Princess. What would anyone ever want with my life? Tasia allowed herself a smile. I just want our new guard to understand that her duty includes you too. One never knows. I suppose one never does, Mila agreed. At any rate, shall we eat before our food gets cold? They settled in for their meal, both doing their best to pretend the guard was not still in the room as they chattered and laughed. A guard is just another servant, Tasia reminded herself. And like any other servant, she would be seen and not heard. Until she could find a way to get rid of her, Tasia might as well grow used to having her near. Tell me about that boy I caught you with in bed last week, Tasia said. What was his name again? Lars? Lars? Mila repeated, her brow furrowing. I don't remember a Lars. Which boy do you mean? Which boy? Tasia laughed. Just how many of them are there, Mila? The open secret of Mila's active love life and Tasia's own was the other reason the princess didn't worry too much about chambermaids and palace guards coming to any scandalous conclusions about Tasia's relationship with Mila. The men were a smokescreen, in a way, obscuring the place where Tasia kept her true heart hidden. You're one to talk, Mila said. She chewed her lip thoughtfully for a moment. Lars. Oh, do you mean Willem, the son of... Oh, bollocks. Who is the lord from Gart Red? Do you mean Lord Burke of House Garton? Yes, that's it, Mila said. That was definitely Willem, not Lars. Whatever his name is, I don't know why you bother with that one, Mile. He's terribly dull. Mila smirked. Maybe, but he has a great arse. Point taken, Tasia said. But honestly, House Garton, those lords and their sons never speak of anything but horses and hunting dogs. How can you take someone so boring to bed? It's never stopped you before, Mila countered playfully. As if you chose Marcus for his quick wit. Tasia glanced in Jocelyn's direction. Open secret or no, she wasn't sure that she wanted the new guard to hear about her various activities with the young men in and around the palace. Who knew what the guard would say to Cole, or what Cole in turn would say to her father? Sorry, Mila said in a low voice, following Tasia's gaze to where the guard stood a few yards away. Your Highness, my lady, the guard said into the silence that had followed Mila's mumbled apology. Would you prefer that I remain in the antechamber until I am needed? Tasia paused a moment. The guard must have been listening to their conversation, which Tasia didn't like. But she had the good sense to offer Tasia and Mila some modicum of privacy, which Tasia did like. Yes, actually, Tasia said. I would prefer that. The guard turned to go. Wait a moment, Jocelyn. Have some grapes before you leave. Tasia broke off a handful of grapes and extended them towards the guard. A peace offering, a token of appreciation. A treat for an animal still being trained. When Jocelyn didn't come any closer to accept the grapes, Tasia said, They're fresh from the vineyards just outside the city, probably picked this morning. Perhaps Jocelyn could be won over, just as Tasia had won over the night shift guards at the Sunfall Gate. Jocelyn shook her head. Thank you, Princess, but I ate with Cole and His Majesty the Emperor at the noontime meal already. Tasia shrugged. Suit yourself, but they are here if you change your mind. She smiled at Jocelyn and plucked a grape from the stem with her teeth. You're going to be late, Princess, Mila said, when she finished pinning Tasia's second braid into a neat curl on the top of her head. I wouldn't have been, except for the girl who insisted on telling me the entire raunchy adventure between herself and Willem the boring dog boy. Mila grinned. Don't blame me. You asked for the details. I merely fulfilled your wishes, as a good handmaid is meant to do. Tasia caught Mila's eye in the mirror of the vanity. You're so much more than a handmaid to me, she said, no longer teasing the girl. You know that, don't you? Mila chuckled. I suppose, Princess. She placed her hands on Tasia's shoulders, leaned forward, and pecked her on the cheek. Now hurry up or you will truly be late, and I don't want you telling Norix it was my fault again. Last time you were late, he stopped me in a corridor and berated me on negligence of my duties for 10 minutes. She rolled her eyes mightily. And stared at my breasts throughout the entire lecture, I should add. Tasia laughed. That sounds like Norix. He's hardly looked me in the eye since my 12th birthday. Unless my nipples are actually eyes and I didn't realize it. Mila gave a mock gasp and covered her mouth. What would your father say if he knew? He wouldn't believe it. I don't think my father knows or cares what a nipple is, or what it's for. I know what it's for, said Mila. And she leaned around the princess and dipped her head, biting at Tasia's breast through her gown until the princess squealed and cuffed her lightly. Stop that, Tasia said through bouts of giggles. You'll leave a smudge on the dress and then everyone will know. No one knows anything, Mila said tiredly, with the air of someone who had said the same words many times before. If they did, I would have been removed from your service years ago. She had a point. Tasia didn't know what to call the relationship she had with Mila, but she knew they'd been something more than friends for at least 3 years now. Do you think that the guard saw the contraption in the bed earlier today? Tasia asked, keeping her voice low. No, and if she did, so what? I doubt nomads have enough imagination to create such a toy, let alone to guess its purpose. I hope you're right, Tasia said. Mila gave an impatient sigh. What are you still doing here? You need to get to your lessons already. You're right, of course you're right, Tasia said. And she hurried from the bedchamber and into the antechamber. Jocelyn stood in the center of the room, alert but still, hand on the pommel of the short sword. You're to go everywhere that I go, correct, guard? Yes, princess, said the guard. Then you are about to enjoy your first royal tutoring session, in which we will be discussing the fascinating topic of the early history of the Empire. Come along now.
You have been listening to Book Clips. Check out the show notes for the synopsis and buy links for this book. If you are interested in showcasing your novel, then check out the show notes for more information.